Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've got some big updates with Donald Trump at the NATO Summit, getting some very important questions on the Iran strikes, on what he thinks the future is in terms of potential negotiations with Iran, along with a few other smaller things. He brings Rubio up here, where, by the way, it's been reported, just a side note, NATO now is committing to 5% of their total GDP going to defense spending. Remember when they made a huge big stink and they moaned about Trump saying that we need countries to at least get to 2% in terms of a commitment with their defense spending relative to their GDP? Well, now they're up to 5% because we know what happened in 2022 with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Zelensky now is there. And apparently Trump and Zelensky talked and it went well. We'll see what comes of that in terms of maybe some type of ceasefire for that war. But that's another story for another day. Today, we've got the big updates. We know CNN and the New York Times came out. There were some murmurings a few days ago, but yesterday they really released it. They said Trump's own intelligence is saying that, oh, the strikes were not catastrophic. Trump initially released the statement that he put out, or he went out and gave a statement to the American people and said, this is catastrophic, they're destroyed. Trump is being questioned by Caitlin Collins, the CNN correspondent. He's very angry about it, but he confirms, he says, yes, this is how assessments work. There was an initial assessment. It said there might be a ton of damage, there might be a little damage. Israel's got a ton of intelligence within the Iranian area, and they know that based off of what we can tell, based off of people that have been near these sites, I mean, they're completely annihilated. You also have the Trump administration explaining just how they attacked these facilities and the ones that they chose. We know about Fordo. It's a palace. It took forever to actually put together. They say about 10 years of construction and maybe even more. But it's not just Fordo. It's also other facilities. They bombed a total of 3, including one called Estefan, which is where, if you listen to what Steve Witkoff said, he said this is where the main conversion process happens, which has to happen for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Now, maybe they have other conversion facilities, but one of the main ones that they have, or the main one, and Witkoff said specifically, based on our intelligence, this is the only one that we know of, and it's above ground, and it deals with the conversion of uranium, which is extremely important when it comes to creating a nuclear bomb. If that gets destroyed, if they can't convert uranium, they cannot produce a nuclear weapon. They cannot go through the entire enrichment process, because apparently there's a conversion at the beginning of the process and then at the end. And so if they've destroyed the conversion facilities, they're not going to be able to be nuclear. They're going to have to rebuild their conversion facilities, let alone the damage to Fordo. And we can see the initial assessments. It's reported they did target the weak spots. They sent the MOBs through the ventilation shafts. And they just, I mean, it's hard to say. People are like, well, why is there no crater? Well, no, with those type of bombs that got dropped, those bombs go, depending on if they hit concrete or if they hit rock, they either go 50 to 200 feet below the surface. So the bombs are not going to be blowing up until they're well below the surface because of the way in which, I mean, it's strategic, the way in which that facility was built. It was built underground and far underground with multiple layers. So you're trying to destroy as much as possible. But they're saying, well, a lot of the centrifuges weren't harmed. And then they say, well, they transported, yeah, I believe they transported a lot of their enriched uranium out probably months before. People are like, well, why did Trump telegraph it? That's irrelevant. They were, if Iran was smart, and you're in negotiations with Trump and he says, I'm giving you 2 months or else, obviously you're going to play it safe and move a bunch of it, but they're not going to be able to move a lot of the centrifuges out from Fordo or some of these other nuclear places. It's very hard to move centrifuges. Yes, you can do it. The centrifuges are smaller. When I think of centrifuges, I think of like the Cosmodome Soviet centrifuges, the massive ones, but when it comes to enriched uranium centrifuges, they are smaller, and technically you can move them, and people have been saying they moved them. But listen to what Trump has to say here. Let's see Trump against Caitlin Collins, and this is big stuff, because this is about the assessment from CNN and New York Times that they got from the intelligence. But then Trump says, no, that's just the initial assessment that always says, well, there might be a ton of damage or there might be a little damage. Hegseth and Vance have confirmed it. Vance has said it's impossible for Iran to get a nuclear bomb now based off of their intelligence.
Please, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh, fake news, CNN? Oh, yeah. Here we go. Wait till you hear this question.
Thank you, sir.
You should really say how great our soldiers and our warriors are.
I think everyone appreciates our soldiers and our warriors. I do have two questions for you, Mr. President. You just cited Israeli intelligence on these attacks. Earlier, you said U.S. intelligence was inconclusive. Are you relying on Israeli intelligence for your assessment of the impact of the strikes?
No, this is also Iran made the statement. And it's also, if you read the document that was given, that Pete can talk about if you'd like, the document said it could be very severe damage, but they didn't take that. They said it could be limited or it could be very severe. They really didn't know, other than to say it could be limited or it could be very, very severe. And you didn't choose to put that because it was very early after. Since then, we've collected additional intelligence. We've also spoken to people who have seen the site, and the site is obliterated. And we think everything nuclear is down there. They didn't take it out. Okay.
Wow. So Trump says they didn't move any of the centrifuges, everything nuclear. Maybe they didn't move some of the enriched uranium, but the point here is that Trump is saying, yes, we know of the intelligence report. That was an early assessment that they do to where they say, well, it might have destroyed a lot or it might have not done much. But, you know, it's been confirmed. I mean, especially when you're looking at something like Estefan, which is above ground, a conversion facility. They bomb it. What do you think is going to happen to it? You think it's going to survive, really? An above ground facility? You can make arguments about Fordo because we don't know the exact layout of it. It's under mountains. It's under rock. It's hard topography to understand. So there's more unknowns about Fordo, but anything above the surface, especially Israel, can hit stuff above the surface as well. And they've bombed nuclear facilities. I mean, that's what the original preliminary strikes were in part based on. So Trump is saying, well, no, we know about the initial report. And that's why, because people were like, well, are CNN and New York Times making this up? Is Trump trying to give them false information? And it's like, well, no, they're not going to make something like that up in terms of, because that's like a blatant thing. You know, you either get an intelligence report saying everything was destroyed, or you get an intelligence report saying, you know, there wasn't much damage. There were obviously some murmurings that maybe the strikes, I mean, because Fordo, it's hard to tell. I mean, it's underground. You would think the ones with aerial photos above ground, and we saw the before and after of the sites that were above ground, they got obliterated. They were hitting the perfect spots in which Trump and the administration wanted them to be hit. But with Fordo, it's a little bit different because of the fact that it's mostly underground. And people say, well, there's no crater. There's not going to be a crater with a bomb like that explodes 50 to 200 feet underground. It's just not going to happen. So Trump is saying, I mean, in the administration, Vance just released a statement in a tweet and said, they got destroyed. It's done. They can't, I mean, you know, if they destroyed their conversion facility, they're not going to be able to produce a nuclear bomb. The thing is they still probably have enriched uranium. People have to understand when it comes to enriching uranium, you need massive infrastructure, huge nuclear infrastructure to enrich uranium fully to 90%. And what we've done is we have destroyed 3 of their biggest facilities for enriching the uranium via, you know, the infrastructure buildup that they have with the centrifuges. Now, we don't know if they have secret facilities. Remember, it came out 2 months ago. There was a secret Iranian nuclear facility. But think about it. You've got all this unknown right now. There's this tentative ceasefire in place. But Trump, in a pretty surprising move, says that he's not interested now. Well, you can see NATO chief calls Trump daddy. Yeah, now they all love Trump. And so NATO is like, they're like obsessed with Trump now. And the NATO chief is like, you know, you can take Greenland daddy. It's fine. I'm kidding. But no, but now NATO and a lot of the leaders are calling Trump like the dad and the father and like the noble leader of the group, because they want him to still be involved in Ukraine. And now even the chief is like, daddy, please save us from Russia. And so that just goes to show you. I mean, yeah, I took it a little bit out of context there, but you can see this is the other big thing. Trump says he's not interested in restarting negotiations with Iran. I don't think it's necessary. Well, listen, and I'm going to play this. This is another minute-long clip. What does this mean? Now, obviously, their intelligence is saying that because of the type of facilities that were destroyed, you know, there's many different processes when it comes to creating a nuclear bomb. If they've destroyed facilities that house the parts of the process of creating a nuclear bomb, and you can't do that process without rebuilding the facility. The administration is correct. I will also say in that report, they gave a timeline. The CNN and New York Times report, it said it only set Iran back by 2 or 3 months, which would mean that they have other conversion facilities, or Estefan was not destroyed to the point to what the administration is claiming. Fordo is a lot more complicated, again, because it's underground. You can't really tell how much of the... I mean, we don't even have the full Fordo mapped out. There could be hidden areas underneath it. So you're not going to know exactly how much of it was destroyed. But, I mean, you're dropping MOBs into ventilation shafts. You don't think that's going to wreak havoc on most of that facility? But what Trump says here is, and this is kind of the next step, it's like, so what happens with Iran? Because obviously they still have some form of enriched uranium. Now, whether or not they can do anything with that because of the process in which it takes to enrich the uranium, will they have to build the facilities before they're able to enrich the uranium to a full 90%? Some people say they already got 90% enriched uranium. Who knows? They're at least at 60%, and I'm sure they still have some, because you're able to transport enriched uranium. It is a process, but you're able to do it. And so what Trump says, because you have to think, well, they still have the enriched uranium, so what do we do with Iran? Is there going to be a nuclear deal now? Would Iran agree to it? I think Trump probably knows they won't agree to it. The issue is Iran does have a serious incentive to get a nuclear bomb after being struck by both Israel and the United States. And what people think is going to happen is Israel is going to fearmonger again to the United States that Iran now is rapidly developing a nuclear weapon, and we're in the same spot. That's the problem if Trump doesn't want to do a nuclear deal, because why wouldn't Iran, if they've still got this enriched uranium, which J.D. Vance said yesterday they still do, but then Vance put out a statement today saying all of the facilities were destroyed, so who knows? But they obviously still have some form of enriched uranium. All of their enriched uranium did not get... The problem is if you don't have the facilities, the uranium is useless. So if they have destroyed all their facilities, that especially important facilities when it comes to the steps in which, like the conversion center, in terms of the steps of being able to produce a nuclear bomb, the administration could technically say, yes, we've cut off the ability for Iran to produce a nuclear weapon because we've eliminated the facilities that house a few of the steps in the process of creating a nuke. But let's see what Trump says.
Interested in restarting negotiations with Iran? And if so, have they received?
So our people, Marco could answer this, but our people are not, I'm not. The way I look at it, they fought, the war's done, and, you know, I could get a statement that they're not going to go nuclear. We're probably going to ask for that, but they're not going to be doing it. But they're not going to be doing it anyway. They've had it. They've had it. Now, maybe someday in the future we'll want that. But
all right, I'm going to play all of this, but Trump is basically insinuating it's impossible for them to go to get a nuclear bomb based off of the facilities that were destroyed. That's what Trump is insinuating. And then he hints, well, maybe in the future they'll go for it. But he says a nuclear deal doesn't really matter because they can't make a nuclear bomb based off of the facilities that we destroyed. That's what Trump's saying here.
I've asked Marco, do you want to draw, I just asked him the question as we were walking on the stage, do you want to draw up a little agreement for them to sign? Because I think we can get them to sign it. I don't think it's necessary. Marco, do you want to talk about that, please?
Well, Mr. President, I think President Trump has shown a willingness to meet and talk to anybody in the world who's interested in peace. I don't know of any president that's been as willing as he has to meet with anyone and talk about peace. We'd love to have peaceful relations with any country in the world. And so obviously that'll depend on Iran's willingness not just to engage in peace, but to negotiate directly with the United States, not through some third country or fourth country process. But I know of no president, probably in our modern history, that's sought peace more than President.
Right, and so he's making a reference to potentially Putin facilitating the talks or Russia, but that's not going to happen. He's saying it needs to be direct with the United States or any other country. I mean, not just Russia, but we know Russia's allied with Iran. But the point here is Trump says, you know what, it's not necessary. Based off of our reports, and listen, if that's true, what an amazing thing that is, to where Iran would have to go through a process in which they rebuild for a long period of time, to where, during the Trump administration, these 4 years, there's not going to be an issue with Iran. And hopefully this is a situation the United States steps back from. And I will say it does seem like get in, get out. That's exactly what Trump did. He got in, he went in, they dropped the bombs, they got out, and now they're really out. And so what he is saying is we don't have to have a deal with them because they can't produce a nuclear weapon. And he says, well, if we want to have them sign something, I guess we can, but them having a nuclear deal is kind of irrelevant because they can't go nuclear. And that's the hope that the intelligence is right on that. And this isn't a situation in a few months to where Israel now fearmongers to the United States that no, they have these secretive facilities that we've discovered. And now they're even more emboldened to make a nuclear bomb. And they're racing as fast as ever to get it because they feel threatened because they were struck by Israel and the United States. That's not something we want to have happen here. Right? Because we can kind of choreograph it and see it potentially playing out that way. We don't want that to happen. What we want is this to be over, and Trump is saying that, yes, they cannot produce a nuclear weapon because we've destroyed several of the important steps that have to be taken for them to have a nuclear weapon. What Iran decides to do next, I mean, Trump had said he wanted unconditional surrender, whatever that means. I guess he doesn't really, he seems content at this point with the damage that the MOBs did to the nuclear sites. And he seems content with his intelligence, even though the intelligence, at some point we're going to know how badly these sites were damaged. Now, unfortunately, it is a situation, especially with Fordo, to where it's fog of war, and we cannot really examine them. They're underground. Israel has intelligence, but to be honest, it would benefit Israel for them to not be honest about it and say, oh, wait, you actually didn't destroy all of them. They're still producing a nuclear bomb. You need to go bomb them again. Because Israel wants the regime change. Right now, Trump is saying, the Trump administration has been clear, they're not interested in regime change. And Trump had said on Sunday that, well, maybe if Iran, does it themselves, it'd be the best thing. But now Trump says on Monday, it causes chaos and we're not interested. Or I think he said that yesterday. But either way, Trump is saying we don't need a nuclear deal because their nuclear program doesn't exist, at least to any degree that would threaten us in the future. So whether or not we believe that, whether or not that's the truth, there's some conflicting reports. They're going to have other facilities. The concern is just like in a month from now, oh, we found another hidden facility and now they're really emboldened to develop a nuke and they have all their uranium still saved. And that's the concern because we already had this intelligence which said that, and I think Trump was getting a lot of it from Israel, that said that they were rapidly developing a nuclear bomb. All of a sudden, it was like this huge crisis in the span of a week, and we just had to strike them, or they had to come to a deal in which they gave up everything, when in reality, it was very likely they were at 60% enrichment. I understand they have these facilities. They don't build the facilities for medical purposes in terms of the uranium enrichment. They're building them mainly as a deterrent. That's what I would say. Because just the idea of Iran trying to strike the United States is so ridiculous. I mean, you would destroy your own country if you tried striking mainland U.S. But either way, that's just the current update. It seems like Trump is saying we don't need a nuclear deal because they don't have a nuclear program. There was the CNN and New York Times articles that said, well, turns out the administration did not strike and obliterate the facilities like Trump had originally said. But the administration denies that and said that that was a preliminary report and kind of just a typical thing you'll see when the report first comes out to say it might have done a ton of damage or it might have not done a lot depending on the more information. And according to the more information that we got, that they've completely obliterated all of the facilities that they intended to hit. And again, it's important because if it is true and the U.S. intelligence is correct, whether or not it's correct, we don't know. But Witkoff said that the only conversion facility that they know of was obliterated by the United States in a bombing run, and possibly also by Israel because it's above ground. Israel can reach that. Then they cannot create a nuclear weapon because there needs to be conversion of uranium in two different points during the process at which the bomb is created. So, I mean, that's why we hope that's true and that their conversion facility has been destroyed. If their only conversion facility has been annihilated, they would have to rebuild it before they were able to come close to getting a nuclear bomb. How long that would take, I don't know. But either way, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.